Hey y'all, I'm Catherine Burns, Artistic Director of the Moth.
And I'm Harry Wald, Director of Public Programs here at the Greenwood Cemetery.
And welcome to the Moth at Greenwood!
Woo! Welcome to the Moth at Greenwood. I am so sorry that you cannot be here live with us, but because of the wonders of the internet, you can enjoy all these great storytellers from the comfort of your home.
They say that Greenwood is a place that the dead create for the living, and our Moth nights at Greenwood have always been among the most magical. We're so thrilled to be here with you tonight. Since the pandemic hit, this is the first time we've been able to get our staff and a cast together in person. We're all wearing masks, as you can see. We're being socially distanced and very safe, but it means so much to us that you're joining us here tonight from your homes.
And without any further ado, tonight's musician, Miss Ma Swift.
Ms. Swift, everyone! Hello, how are you? Welcome to the Moth. I miss you. I miss you. I miss you. I miss all of you. You at home. This is our first semi-live show, and I am just thrilled. I didn't know how much I missed live storytelling. So I am so excited for this show. Welcome everyone at home. I know you're not here with us, but do your best to make it feel like you are at an actual show. I promise it's gonna feel good. So shut off your phone or put it on silent. Take your device, make sure that it is fully charged so you won't get interrupted. Do full screen. I'm forgetting what that's called for a second. Full screen. If you can hear some ambulances around, that is because, lovely people, you are in Brooklyn. That's right. It might look all bucolic, and that is because we are in the wonderful Greenwood Cemetery, but you are still in Brooklyn. And just a few feet in that direction, there is traffic lights and other people who sound like me. So welcome. I am so excited. For anybody who is at home, who has not ever been to a Moth show, let me tell you what's in store for you tonight. Tonight, you are going to be hearing 5 true personal stories told by 5 different people, right? 5 folks are going to get up to a mic without any notes, without any script, and they are going to share with you a true personal story, right? Personal meaning story is about them. And it is very simple, and it is very raw, and that simplicity and that rawness is its power. The way the evening will go is we're going to have 3 folks and then an intermission. I think it'll be about 5 minutes, all right? So we don't go running off and doing anything too exciting. And then we will have 2 more storytellers. All right, so 5 true personal stories. The thing that we ask of our folks, besides that their stories be true and be personal, is that they keep those stories to within about 10 to 12 minutes. So that is why Maz has remained here with me, because she is actually our timekeeper for the night. So if a person kind of gets to that, 10, 11-minute mark in their story and it doesn't seem like they're wrapping it up, Maz is going to play a note to let them know to do so, like this. Lovely. Nice. Wouldn't shut me up, but that was nice. So if they keep going, right, if they don't kind of get the hint, right, and they keep going, Maz is going to play again a second time, this time with a little more chutzpah, like so. And the person's going to run away. No, they're going to just start to, hopefully, naturally wrap it up. All right, so the only other thing, right, true, personal stories told in about 10, 12 minutes. The only other thing that we ask of our storytellers is that their story be on theme. And our theme tonight is, befitting of this place, close encounters. Close encounters. Now, that is the theme for tonight. That has not at all been the theme of our lives for the last 6 months, right? The theme of our lives for the last 6 months is no close encounters. None. No closer than 6 feet encounters. That'll be our next show. Now, this is so our theme is close encounters, and folks might play with that in lots of various ways. Of course, that's the theme because we are in a cemetery. And this cemetery is not just like any cemetery. This is a national landmark cemetery. It is a place where there are a lot of notable folks buried. Jean-Michel Basquiat is buried here. Leonard Bernstein is buried here. And my beloved grandparents are buried here. Yes, thank you. Few claps for my grandpa. You better clap. Or they're going to be haunting all of us in about 10 minutes. That's right. Clap for my grandma. So my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, both my grandparents are buried here. And I mean, not that everybody isn't really close with their grandparents, but I'm particularly close with my grandparents because I was partly raised by my grandparents. So I grew up living in the same house as my grandmother and grandfather, who just so happened to live next door to 2 other elderly couples. And they all happened to be Italian Catholics, right? So this was my little kid life. I basically grew up in a Italian Catholic geriatric commune. It was heaven, right? It was just it was heaven. But my normal speaking voice at 6, 7 years old was a good 10 times louder than anybody else under the age of 75, And I had a particular affinity for sugar-free sucking candy and butterscotch, right? Things that no other kids liked. So this place is it's like important to me to be around. Feel like I'm around my grandparents. This is like it's a magical place for me to be in Greenwood. But also, in addition to the fact that my family is buried here, I got married here. I actually got married here. Yes. So if you were wondering, thank you. Thank you. If you're wondering at home, this Greenwood is a cemetery, but it is also a place where events happen. So it's not like crazy that the Moth has showed up here and we're like just staking out and like standing in front of tombstones and doing stuff that we're not supposed to do. There are events here, and like I said, I got married here. And just a quick thing on that, it was great. It was the one thing that my wife and I agreed on. You know, we planned a very small little wedding. We are like very, very different people. We're very different. We're both from New York, but we're from like different sides of the tracks, New York, you know. She is from, you know, the Upper East Side and prep school, you know. She played field hockey. I am from Queens, you know. We don't have hockey. We don't have fields, you know. But the one thing we agreed on was to have a wedding here in Greenwood because it's just magic. So I hope you enjoy the environment when you know being here, sort of, kinda, with us tonight. So the last thing I've got to say is this. Just like in our regular shows, here at the Moth, when we bring our storytellers up onto stage, we don't do that by way of like, you know, telling you some bio info and then bringing them up. We do that by asking everybody a question, and then we bring them up onto stage with their answer to that question. So tonight's question, appropriately, is, what do you want your tombstone to say? What do you want on your tombstone? All right. Is everybody here ready for some stories? You good? You ready? You feeling it? Give it some love because we're about to do this thing. So when I asked our first storyteller that question, what do you want your tombstone to say? She said to me, well, it's a quote from Frozen 2. And I was like, oh, God. I didn't have high hopes. But it turns out it's beautiful. It is, you are the one you've been waiting for. Please welcome Devin Elise Wilson.
New York City, New Year's Eve. 2020 is going to be a great year. With my hype song out tonight from Rent on blast repeat, I get all jazzed up. I do my makeup, my nails, I lotion my entire body and not just the parts visible to the world. I put on a new dress that hugs me in all the right places, and I throw on a big fluffy coat that makes me feel like a movie star. I grab a couple of condoms and put them in my bag because you never know, and a lady should always be prepared, especially when she feels this good. Just as I'm leaving the apartment, I get a text message. It's from my dad. It says, hey kiddo, there's a saying that some people use. I don't really like it. Here goes. The best way to get over a man is to get under a new one. That's BS. I know you know that. Enjoy your special evening. Now let's backtrack for a minute here. My boyfriend of 4 months and I had just broken up the day before. We'd made plans months ago to spend New Year's Eve together in the city at his place, but by the time the holiday came around, we both knew what was coming. There was no spark. And quite honestly, my gut had been trying to tell me for the entirety of the relationship that this just wasn't it. He didn't actually see me. So I was glad for the clean break while simultaneously sad to be alone in the city on New Year's. When I realized I could ring it in from my happy place, Marie's Crisis, I knew I was ready for a fresh start. But how could my dad sense my energy from across the country, though? I laughed to myself as me and my Happy New Year headband and my condoms left the house. Marie's Crisis is a musical theater, sing-along, show tune, piano bar in the West Village, and there is no place like it. It's easy to make friends when you're all singing Defying Gravity, Circle of Life, and Seasons of Love at the top of your lungs. There was one woman in particular who I'd seen there before. She had the voice of a Broadway star. After singing a few songs with each other, she pulled me into her group, and we all sang and drank together. A couple hours in, they started talking about kisses at midnight. She turned to me and said she was kissing a couple other people, but she'd like to kiss me too. I'd never kissed a woman before. I'd always been open to it, but the opportunity had never presented itself so organically. So midnight comes around. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! No kiss for Devin. 12:05, still no kiss. She's busy celebrating with her friends, and I'm not the type to tap her on the shoulder like, hi, remember me? So after some high fives and Happy New Year wishes with the random musical theater lovers around me, I, slightly disappointed, just keep singing. About 12:15, she turns to me and we lock eyes. And I don't think either of us were expecting that kind of kiss. Fireworks. She pulled back and said, ooh, this might be my favorite kiss of the night. Don't tell the others. I didn't, but they might have guessed because what we did do was continue to make out shamelessly. At a certain point, she leans in and whispers, do you want to come home with me? I say yes, followed by, I've never been with a woman before. She says, it's okay, I have. And we keep singing and kissing. She would pop in and out for a smoke break here and there, and when she'd come back in, she'd check, you're still coming home with me, yeah? I was getting increasingly more nervous, but not because this would be my first time. So on her next break, I thought, okay, let's tell her that we're herpes positive now so that she can make a decision sooner rather than later. So with resolve, I throw my coat over my shoulders and I walk outside. I was expecting to catch her smoking alone, but she was in a group of at least 5 people, and all I heard was, you guys, she said it like 10 times. She's definitely coming home with me. I froze like a deer in headlights. I definitely wasn't supposed to be hearing this. I pivoted on the balls of my feet to avoid the click-clack of my heeled boots on the pavement as I tiptoed back into the bar. They were talking about me. I guess they thought I wasn't gonna go through with it. Little did they know, me not going through with it was furthest from my mind. Last call, final song, we hop in a cab, and I am multitasking, enthralled by the feeling of her lips on mine while simultaneously trying to build up the courage. You can do it. Just say it. We're on the West Side Highway now, about 150 blocks from her place, 100 from mine. Okay, just say it before we pass your place, so if she changes her mind, we can make 2 stops. I allow myself to sink into the unbridled pleasure of us for a few more blocks. Just as I'm coming to the peak of my internal pep talk, she turns to me and says, I should have said something sooner, but my heart is racing. Are you allergic to cats? I respond no with a giggle, and she laughs too. She has unknowingly given me the perfect in. I take a breath and say, speaking of things we should have mentioned sooner, and I tell her. I tell her that I'm herpes positive, and this is how it manifests in my body, this is how I manage it, and this is what it means for us tonight. As I wait for her response, I'm proud of me for allowing myself to live fully despite fear. She thanks me for my honesty and says, this is worth the risk. And then we talk about her sexual health history too. Finally able to fully relax into us, into our chemistry, our heat, I feel seen in a way that I haven't in a long while. Walking to the train the next morning with Out Tonight still blasting on repeat in my headphones, I can't help but grin as I reminisce about the night before. What a way to ring in the new year. I will save you the play-by-play, but let's just say I definitely didn't spend that night under a man.
Devin Elise Wilson, everyone. All right. I love that. Of course I love that. What wouldn't I not love about that story? Like everything, lesbians, Marie's crisis. I love that. It also reminded me of another quote. I don't know if anybody knows this, maybe anybody at home. Tallulah Bankhead's quote. Yes, I got a couple nods. My daddy warned me about men and booze, but he never said anything about women and cocaine. Tallulah Bankhead, everybody. Tallulah Bankhead. So Devin, you should know, came to us via our Moth Story Slams. Moth Story Slams are these open mic things where you can show up, put your name in a hat, and possibly get called to tell your story. And that is how I first came to the Moth. I showed up one night, put my name in a hat, and told a story. So if you got a story to tell, that's like my absolute biggest recommendation is the way to go about doing it. The Moth also has a pitch line, but show up to a story slam, put your name in a hat, join us. All right, how you feeling? Feeling good? Feeling ready for another story? Ready? I'm feeling ready. All right. So when I asked our next storyteller the question, what do you want your tombstone to say? She said, life is short. Buy the shoes. Please welcome Angela Derikas Taylor.
I never knew my Greek grandmother, a person I would have called Yaya, because she got very sick and died when my dad was only 5 years old. He didn't remember anything about her, and there were no photos, no mementos, so I just didn't know anything except that her name was Maria, which was my middle name. But other than that, no one ever talked about her. It was almost like she didn't exist. I did know my grandfather, though, a man I called Papu, and I loved him very much. My dad used to tell me stories about how he came from Greece in the early 1900s and how he worked really hard and tried to make a better life, but things didn't work out for Papu. And by the time I was born in 1961, Papu was a sickly old man living by himself in a tenement apartment in the South Bronx. My dad used to bring me to visit him all the time, and I loved to go and visit him because he made my favorite dish, chicken rice pilaf. And I can picture it now as a little girl sitting on his lap and eating that warm, creamy rice with a little bit of that cool, strained yogurt on top. And he'd bounce me on his knee, and he'd pat me on my head, and he'd tell me I was kolokoritsi, a good girl. And I love that man very much. Papu died when I was 12, and the funeral was terrible. The Greek tradition is that the casket is open during the Mass, and at the end of the Mass, you're supposed to go up and kiss the body and say goodbye. I had never seen a dead body before, and I really did not want to go up and do that. But my dad took my hand, and we went up together to the coffin, and we said goodbye to Papu. And when we got home from the funeral, my dad told me that he needed to tell me something about our family, but that what he was going to tell me was a secret and that I could never tell anyone. And then he told me the truth about the way his mother had died. The truth was that she didn't get sick and die when he was 5 years old. The truth was that my grandfather killed my grandmother. Supposedly she had a boyfriend, they had an argument, they were in the kitchen, my grandfather went crazy, he picked up a knife, and he stabbed her to death. And after my dad told me this, I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, who wants to hear that, that your grandfather killed your grandmother? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I was like, why isn't he in prison? Why didn't he never go to prison? And my dad said, well, he did go to prison for a little while. And then my dad got all teary. And then I felt so bad. I loved my dad, too. I didn't want to upset him. So I just gave him a hug and promised him that I would keep the family secret. And I did a pretty good job keeping the secret for most of my life. I mean, there were a few times in my crazy years, one of those 4 a.m. drunken stupor, bet you can't top this story kind of times. But other than that, I kept the secret. I put it out of my mind. I buried it. Several years after the funeral, my aunt, my dad's sister, went to Greece. She had found her mother's family. And when she came back from that trip, she brought a single photograph. It was a black and white 8x10 studio portrait. And it was the first time that I had ever seen what my grandmother looked like. And after my dad showed me the picture, he took it and he put it back in a manila envelope and stuck it in a drawer. And I was thinking, gee, why didn't he frame it and put it up on the family picture wall? And then I realized that it was still a secret, that she was still a secret. So life goes on. I am married. I'm middle-aged. I've got 2 kids of my own. I'm sitting on the computer and I'm Googling my last name. And up pops this article. And the headline says, "Kills wife, tries suicide." It was in the New York Times. It was dated February 8th, 1935, teeny tiny. So I start to read this article. And it says, "In a jealous rage, Peter Dorikas stabbed his wife." Peter Dorikas, that's my grandfather. That's Papu. And then my grandmother's named, and my dad is named, and my aunt is named. And after I read this article, I'm like, wow, this really happened. She really existed. These are my people. And suddenly, my lifelong secret became an obsession. I just wanted to know everything that I possibly could about my grandmother. I tried to talk to my dad, and he was not happy. He was like, look, this is a secret. I don't want to talk about this. You know how upsetting this is. He's like, please, don't resurrect my mother. So on my own, I decided to do some research. I found her death certificate, and I also found some court documents. And when I read these documents, I learned that my grandmother had been stabbed 43 times in her hands, neck, arms, chest, and back. And after I read this, I was in shock again. My grandfather, he actually was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and served only 3.5 years in prison before he was paroled. I found that pretty unbelievable, how someone could stab someone 43 times and only go to prison for 3.5 years. But I thought, well, I don't know, maybe in 1935, if you thought your wife had a boyfriend, it was okay to kill her. And then I thought, well, things have changed for women, but maybe not that much. And I started to get this visceral anger towards my once beloved grandfather. And at the same time, I felt this abundance of love in my heart for my grandmother, for this person that I never knew. And I wanted to know everything about her. I wanted to go to Greece. I wanted to visit her grave. And so I spoke to my aunt, and my aunt told me that my grandmother's body never made it back to Greece. In fact, she was buried in an unmarked grave in a cemetery in Queens. So I went to the cemetery to find her grave, and I'm following the groundskeeper, and we're driving through a very beautiful cemetery like this, and I'm thinking, all right, not so bad, beautiful place. And then we approached this area called the hillside, and it got really dingy and desolate, and the next thing I know, we're out of the car, and I'm following this man, and he points to this headstone, and he says, okay, this is where she is. And I'm like, no. There is no headstone. It's unmarked. That's a man's name. This can't be it. And he explains to me that in this particular area, the bodies are buried 6 people, one on top of the other, and my grandmother is at the very bottom. And this man's name on the headstone is the body on top of hers, and then there are 4 other unnamed bodies on top of that. And I just felt so sad. Like, how could somebody live their life and then there be nothing to ever show that they ever existed? And my knees buckled, and I got down, and I had my hands on the earth, and I don't know what I was doing. I was trying to get close to her, to feel her, I wanted to have her exhumed, right, and give her a proper burial. And after 75 years, there was nothing to exhume. So I talked to the cemetery people, and I'm like, look, I'd like to get her a headstone. Can I do that? They're like, you can, but you got to put that man's name on it too. I'm like, fine, put everybody's name on it. So I get permission and I go home, and I'm really feeling good. I'm like, okay, this is good. We're gonna give my grandmother her rightful place in our family again. We're gonna get her a headstone. We can go visit, and I felt good about it. And then I get there and I'm doing some posting on my social media, and I talk to my family, and they were not happy. I really didn't expect the backlash that I was gonna get. I had cousins, my aunt's kids, not all of them, but some of them, like really angry and talking about me behind my back and saying I was, trying to do something for my own personal gain, exploit the family. And then I get this Facebook message from some 24-year-old guy in Greece who I don't know, telling me that he's my fourth cousin. And he starts telling me that I don't know the truth, and my grandfather was a really good man, and she was bad, she was loose, she dishonored the family, and he warned her, and he told her to stop, and she didn't listen, and he just did what he had to do, and I should just, forgive him. And I was like, forgive him? I don't know. From what I knew from my dad, my grandfather never expressed any remorse at all. As a matter of fact, he said she deserved it. And I was like, here's this poor woman, 29 years old. Imagine the terror, fighting off her husband stabbing her. I mean, what about two little kids, a 5-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, my dad and my aunt losing their mother? And I was like, forgive him? What about her? Can we forgive her? I don't care what she did. And I question the whole boyfriend thing, but whatever. I don't care what she did. She didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. And I was like, you know what? I don't care what you people say. I just was going to go on and do my own thing. Except for my dad. I did care about what my dad had to say. And he was really upset. And look, Angela, he said, this is not your story to tell. This is very personal. This is my story. You don't know what it was like growing up without a mom. It's really not your place. Leave it alone. And I said, Dad, I understand and I feel what you're saying, but it is my story. That was my grandmother, too. She was killed at 29 years old. If she had lived, I would have known her. I would have had a relationship with her. I said, I just want to give her her rightful place in our family. And after that, my dad gave his blessing, and he and my aunt were actually very helpful in getting the headstone made. And on a beautiful day in May of 2010, a dozen of us family members gathered around a brand new headstone with my grandmother's name on it. We represented 4 generations of my grandmother's descendants. My aunt, who was 81 at the time, she brought seashells, and she scattered them around the headstone, just like she might have done as that little 6-year-old girl. My dad was 80. He brought that photograph, which he had had framed, and he put it on an easel next to the headstone. My cousins who were there brought flowers and read poems. My older son, held the music while my younger son played Amazing Grace on the saxophone. And some people thought it wasn't wise to have an 11 and a 12-year-old boy involved in all of this, but I did. I thought it was important for my boys to know that what happened in our family was not okay. And I also wanted to alleviate them of the burden of this 75-year family secret. And after our family did all their things, Father Nick started with the incense and going around the headstone, and he was chanting and praying in Greek, and it was beautiful. It was intoxicating. And my dad took my hand, and he leaned over and he whispered, "Thank you, daughter. Now I don't have to feel shame anymore." And I felt my grandmother's spirit all around us. I felt like she was bursting out of the bottom of that grave and just free from this 75-year secret. And I felt all of her love all around us. And I looked at my dad and my aunt, so happy that they could say goodbye to their mother. And then I looked at the headstone. And my dad said to me, "You're a good girl, Angela. Kolo koritsi. Your grandmother would be proud of you." And I don't know if that was true, but what I did know that on that day, I wasn't saying goodbye to my grandmother. I was just getting to know my yaya, this woman, Maria, Anastasiou Derekas.
Angela Derekas Taylor, everyone. Phew. Yeah, how about that, huh? That's a lot. I am really, really grateful to Angela for sharing that story with us. It really hit me hard, and I'm just gonna say, every once in a while I'll find myself saying, am I too sensitive? Am I being too sensitive about everything? Is the world really as biased and as misogynistic and as racist? And maybe I'm being too sensitive. And then you hear that story, and you're like, no, I'm not being too sensitive, right? It's effed up. Like this woman's grandmother. This isn't like, medieval Europe and we offed the wench and, who cared, right? Like this was this woman's grandmother. This was like 5 minutes ago. She was killed. They gave the guy 3 years. Wow. I'm not being too sensitive. I'm not. So thank you, Angela, for sharing that. And I guess it's sort of a means of transition, but it also to kind of name all of my people who are buried here, so that they sort of get a little of their due. We're humble people, my people. But my family that's buried here, my great-grandfather who bought the plot was a dishwasher, came here from Italy, started off as a dishwasher. He then went on to be a chef, and then he went on and he actually saved up enough money and he bought the restaurant, and he didn't name it. It had been named the El Dorado, which is particularly funny because it was like this very humble, little, modest place. And the El Dorado, that refers to this mythical South American city of gold, right? All right, it's a little, it's like a red table, red and white checkered tablecloth place, But I kind of loved that this is like an immigrant sort of tradition, not officially, but I feel like a lot of people do this. Like in Queens, where I grew up, you'll pass a restaurant and it'll be called the Great Wall of China 2, and you're like, well, it's a storefront with fluorescent lights on Queens Boulevard, to take out joint, or we've got the new Taj Mahal, you're like, well, it's just kind of just like a little place with a booth and you can, a buffet, all right. We appreciate the effort, so my people, that are here, they had their restaurant, and that was my great-grandfather's place. And then my great-uncles worked at the restaurant. They are also buried in the same plot, including my great gay Uncle Jerry, one of my personal faves, my great gay Uncle Jerry. And it's funny, but it's also pretty awesome. He came out in the 50s in an Italian Catholic family, and he was dope. He wore a captain's hat and an ascot, and he had an antique store, if there was a periodic table of elements of gay, my great Uncle Jerry would be carbon, He is like the gay from which all the rest of us gays have been formed and are based upon. And then you have my beloved grandparents who are also buried here. I will tell a story about my grandfather a little bit later. He was a truck driver who went on to become a life insurance salesman. And my grandmother, who's buried here, who is like my hero. I don't have enough time to tell you about her, but she was like a gladiator in a house dress, Like she was just the baddest ass person I've ever met, and I adore her. All right, are we feeling good? We're ready for another story? Yeah. All right. So when I asked our next storyteller the question, what do you want your tombstone to say? He said, Here lies Dion Flynn. Call the cable company before digging. Please welcome Dion Flynn.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, about 5 years ago, I was in New York City, and I got an email, and the email said, "Our mother is dying." It was from a complete stranger. It said, "Our mother is dying in Chicago, and we need Barack Obama to come and cheer up and make nice her deathbed. Come right away. She's dying. She's going to be dead soon. Please, please, please call me, call me, call me." Now, I was not an aide to Barack Obama or in the Secret Service. I had no real personal connection to the man, but I was and am a Barack Obama impersonator. So it was right and true that they should write me. In fact, I've been playing Obama for probably 4 or 5 years at the time, on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon likes my Obama. That's kind of what I'm just realizing, which is a good thing, because what you realize when you play Barack Obama on national television, something that you'd never expected happens. People want you to play Barack Obama at their live functions for things that have nothing to do with Obama and nothing to do with. I've done fundraisers for deadly diseases in Europe. I've done IPOs. I've roasted CEOs at mergers, and I've done Sheva Brachas. I've done 2 Sheva Brachas. I didn't even know what a Sheva Bracha was. Now I know, and now I know what one's like with Obama at it. You know what? I even did a birthday party for a mob-connected woman with Alzheimer's. It's a very small demographic. But, you do it. You say, yes, I've got to earn, I was asked to do an adult movie once dressed as Obama. It was like an X-rated film. I was like, are you kidding me? How much does it pay? Because I got a kid, I got a mortgage, I got a wife, I got a toddler at the time. He's now 7. Hi, Miles. So I got to work. Now, I've always been a very reluctant Barack Obama impersonator. It didn't really come easily. In fact, the Washington Post called me the reluctant Obama in a profile piece they did on all the Obamas. There's about 6 of us worldwide who do it. I rank somewhere between number 3 and number 4. I'm the Obama you get when you want an Obama who kind of looks like the Grinch. Okay, I'll leave that to you. And I'm very reluctant as Obama. I'll tell you what it is. When I was growing up, and I was the only brown kid in my trailer park, I would look at the money, and I would see white presidents. I looked at, Mount Rushmore. I saw white presidents. I was like, I'm never going to have a black president, so I can put that completely out of my mind. Because I did impressions. I could do all the other presidents. I would do Ronald Reagan, Well, let's suppose your mom baked a big blueberry pie. I could do Nixon, right? I'd like to make one thing perfectly clear. But all of those were rooted in derision. They were rooted in I'm making fun of these guys. So let's cut to 2008. Obama becomes president. My friend Ali, who used to write for SNL, comes to me and he goes, dude, SNL doesn't have anybody to play Obama right now. There's nobody on the cast that can play him. You know this. They're putting it out in the comedy community. You got to go. Why aren't you over there? I said, listen, Ali, I can't do an impersonation of Barack Obama. He hasn't even been in the public space yet. My impersonations are rooted in derision. I can't make fun of this guy before he's even been out there. My friend Ali knows me. He goes, is it that or is it you can't do the voice? I was like, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. So I was frightened. After that, I was on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, did about 14 characters or so, weathermen, news guys, stuff like that. No one in particular. One day, one of the producers comes up to me in about 2010, 2011. He goes, looks at the shape of my head, looks at my skin color, looks at my just overall zeitgeist and says, can you do Obama? Duty, my people need me. Duty calls. I go, yes, let's try. And so I figured out the voice. Basically, Obama's voice is like this. Barack Obama, his voice, it goes along like this here and then it just falls. That's it. It's like I always say it's like a sick bird that's flying from the northern states all the way down to the southern states, gets as far as Georgia, and then it just dies. Like that. So I do it, right? I got it. I'm going to do it. I call the guy back from Chicago. I go, deathbed Obama appearance? I gotcha. He goes, we tried to book the number 1 and 2 Obama, but we're down to you. I was like, that hurts, but let's move. What's your mother's name? He says Esther. I changed the name for the story, but he says Esther. Great. So I take control of the conversation. He's just insulted me. I take control of the conversation. And I say, listen, I need you to answer a lot of questions, so that I can do this. I've never done this so quickly with such a quick turnaround. I usually have weeks when I'm doing these gigs for companies. I send them questionnaires. I get them back. My premise is that Barack Obama has access to all the National Security Administration information on you from your whole life and your grandparents and their grandparents. So I send these forms and I get all this information. So I say, hey, listen, I'm going to send you these forms. They got a lot of questions I've come up with over the years to help me really roast somebody. And he says, oh, okay, great, send them. I said, you got to give them out to everybody who's ever known her, friends, daughters, sons, cousins, everybody. You got to get them back to me within 10 hours if you can. I'm going to be there, tomorrow morning. Great, send them. So we hang up and I'm going. Now, perfectionism, that's my kryptonite. I'm like, I don't have time to get this thing right, and I'm going to be roasting someone on their deathbed. Is this going to work? But my superpower is I'm not afraid of death. Let me clarify that. I'm not afraid of, I just have always loved cemeteries. When the Moth asked me, do you want to tell a story at a cemetery? I was like, I'll probably already be there. I'll just wander over. Yes is the short answer. I just love the peace around death. People are afraid of death. I used to go in way before Obama and sing songs to the dying, in hospice. I've just always been called to it. It's been a thing of mine. I was with my mother when she died. So that's a little bit of it bolsters me a little bit. And I fly off, let's say, to Chicago, right? So I'm in the plane, and I'm getting all these emails. I fly like 4 o'clock the next morning, and I don't sleep the whole time. I start to get the emails, start to do the writing. And I'm on the plane, and the information starts to come in about Esther. What's she like? Now, here's another thing I learned. People want to tell Obama the truth, like the real truth. So it starts to come out, and I'm reading these. Okay, she's very secretive. This is, one says. The next email, she was married to a no-good gambler for way too many years. Okay. She spends way too much money on shoes. Okay. She's Mexican, but she's pulled off this thing her whole life like she's Italian. How does that work? It says in the email. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to synthesize this, and I'm putting the jokes together, trying my best. I get to the hotel. I finish the jokes. I get them printed out, and they're coming. I'm going to get a little dossier and everything, and I have the first chance in 32 hours to relax and just think, is this going to work? Roasting this woman on her deathbed. See, and I'm worried about myself, actually. I want to kill. I want to kill at a deathbed. There, I said it. I want to kill at a deathbed. I don't want to die at a deathbed. So, snap to, get in the mirror of the hotel, and I transform myself just like they do at NBC Studios. I put on the suit, start to get a little more confidence. I got the blue tie, the Obama ears. I take these little makeup things that we use to put makeup on, take pieces of them and stick my ears out. I slowly start to become Obama. I put the little mole there. I shake some Topic. It's like pepper on my hair. It's a hair product. I take my own hair, which I have a large collection of, and I start to sprinkle it on, Aquanet the whole thing down, and the transformation is complete. I get in my presidential size SUV, which they have demanded that I rent. It has to be a presidential size SUV. She'll never see it, but it doesn't matter. It's like, it's like Martin Scorsese. They got to wear underwear from the 1800s. It has to be the method, okay? So I go, and I'm suddenly in the suburbs of Chicago somewhere, and the guy is smoking out front of this large house, and that's him, and we pull over, and I come out, and he goes, "You look great." I didn't realize I needed to hear that, but I did. I relaxed. I was like, okay, good. Go inside. I say, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to do my jokes. I'm going to sing a song. I got my guitar, too, by the way, with me. I go inside. First thing I see inside is a very large room. And in the center of it all, everybody who's there, all the relatives, everybody's around the walls. The cameras are going immediately. The cell phone cameras are filming this whole thing. They've all got shirts on that have like some sort of inside joke about Esther. You know, they all get it. I don't get it. And they're all around. But they're as far away as you can be and still be in the same room with this woman who's at the center in this Craftmatic automatic adjustable living bed. And so I go right over. The material is what's going to save me. I go over, I get into the act. I sit down next to her. You know, Esther, I understand you can buy the hell out of some shoes. I understand you're like a compulsive spender when it comes to shoes. And she starts to laugh. She's like with it. I was like, yes. Okay, good. Let's keep going. Yeah, that son of a bitch that you were married to, that compulsive gambler, with him as a compulsive gambler, you as a compulsive spender, did you ever have any money? Laughter. She's like, yes. And the worse the names were that I called her former husband, the happier she got. That dirty son of a bitch. She was like, yes, that's right. I was like, oh, right. And everybody's coming in from the side. They begin to sort of like move in, and we're starting to form this picture of like some Dutch master's painting. We're all gathered around. And so I say to her, this is the one I'm worried about. Is this going to fly? This is family secrets are coming out, and I've been the one hired to say them. Esther, it's pretty obvious to everybody that you're Mexican. Oh, God. Why are you pretending like you're Italian? And she is dying laughing. And she doesn't give any answers. She just reaches for her gin that's in a little plastic cup, and she drinks it. Her eyes have that look, and I know that look from my work in hospice. She's not 100% sure that she's not talking to Barack Obama. She's just kind of like, like that. And she gets a little nauseous. She grabs a bedside nausea bucket, which is a staple of the hospice situation. I hold her hand. She's sick. She's a little sick. She's very vulnerable right now. And she gets sick. But she gets through it. We get through it. How do I finish this? I get out my guitar, and I just want to tell you, just between me and you, you've not been in a surreal situation until you're dressed as a former president singing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah to a woman who will be dead in 36 hours. I heard there was a sacred chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? And she's like, no, no. And I was like, is she saying no, she doesn't care for music? What's going on? And she just speaks out. And she says, I didn't vote for you. What? Why am I here? I look around. Everyone looks different to me all of a sudden. It's like some twisted thing. I'm like, what is the family that hires a dude who's not even her main dude? And so I'm like, okay, can't win them all. I don't know. You know what I said. I wrap up here and I back out, and I'm just sort of, waving to everybody, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's laughing when she says that. She has the best punchline of the night, too, by the way, that one. And just as I'm leaving, her second to the youngest grandson comes over to me. And he wants to show me some up-close magic. Now, let me just tell you, when you do Barack Obama as a grown man, you do up-close magic, too. It's just part of the profile. So we exchange a few, magic tricks back and forth. And the reason this makes me emotional is because I got it. Her grandson didn't want me to leave. These people, whether they voted for me or not, didn't want me to leave. The next big event that was going to happen was going to be Esther's death. And so we'd kind of pause things for a minute. And so I said to Esther on the way out, after we finished exchanging the magic tricks, I said, when you feel better, I'll have a place for you in my cabinet. Out on the porch, we're finished, the gig is over, I'm outside with the guy. The guy reveals to me that he's not really her son, even though he said he was her son. He's like the lawyer or something. And I'm like, okay, this is getting stranger and stranger. And he's lit from underneath by an app and a cool cigarette that he's smoking. And he pays me the second part of the money. I'm a good guy, but I didn't do this gig for free. And he says, there you go. And I said, I got two questions in my mind burning. One is, how did this go? And the other one is, why did you hire me? And I say to him, how did this go? He goes, that was perfect. And the perfectionism was like settled for about 10 hours. And my next question, what? I just let it go. Sometimes it's better to just leave a perfect moment alone. Thanks, everybody.
Dion Flynn. Ah. Oh, that was very, very good. I laughed a lot. I hope you did too. Like the secret to the Obama voice, right? Like that. I'm going to tell everybody that. You know, you're like, it's just going along and then it drops. You know, it's like, that's it. That's it. Hope everyone's having a good time. We are going to take, yes. Yay. Hope you too. Everybody at home too. We are now going to have a little intermission, and then we will be back with more stories for you. Maz Swift, everyone. Hello. Welcome back. It has gotten dark. It's even better, I feel like, for some stories. Some more stories. And as it turns out, it is my turn. It's my turn for a little story. I said it earlier, but I wanted to tell a little story about my grandfather. My grandfather, whose name was Bruno Riccobono. Such a good name, right? He was like a Buddha, you know. He was Buddha. If Buddha was a truck driver from Brooklyn. So, as I said, I grew up in my grandparents' house. My mother and I lived with my grandparents. Lived upstairs. We lived downstairs until I was about 8 or 9. And then my grandmother wanted to move to be with her youngest grandchildren and to help out my aunt, to take care of them. And she decided it was time to leave New York for the first time in her life. They lived in Connecticut. And for the first time ever, she was like, all right, you know, I'm going. She was about 70, I think. And she had grown up here in Brooklyn. She had her baptism, she had her communion, her confirmation, her wedding, and then ultimately her funeral mass in the same church in Brooklyn. But at this point, her life had just been Brooklyn and Queens, and she decided she was going to Connecticut. My grandfather, however, was still working, and he did not want to go. He wanted to keep on working. And the reason for that is that he would become very proud of the work that he did. For the first, 30 years of his life, basically, he was a truck driver. He drove a truck called Linens of the Week. They'd bring the clean restaurant linens, and then they'd pick up the dirty ones. And he did that work for like 30-odd years. And then he got this job selling life insurance. And he was just really proud of himself. It was the first time he wore a suit to work. And I remember him, in the early 80s, like just stuffing himself into this, brown polyester suit, with like the orange and yellow ties. And he was just like super proud. And he was like, I'm not going. I'm going to keep on working. And he actually worked here in Brooklyn in Bay Ridge. And my mom and I were going to stay on living in Queens. And so he was like, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. And I'm just going to live with them in their apartment. So he actually took the bottom bunk in my room. Which for me was awesome. I know other people are like, oh my God. I'm like, I loved it. We would stay up late. We would watch Mets games on TV with the sound off. So my mother didn't know. Like it was, it was great. And every once in a while when my mom had to work, but I had off from school, I would get to go with him to work. And I loved it. We would take off in the morning and he had like this old Buick, which I had actually cleverly, I think, for a little kid, nicknamed Chucky, because when it started, or before it started, it would go chuck, 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 and then vroom, And it was just this mess of a car, right? It was like, it was probably maroon, but it had been like worn down from being parked out in the street in the sun. And it was just like, patchy gray, except for one door panel, which he had replaced, and that was gray instead of red entirely. And it had those, the felt ceilings, the old 70s, like Oldsmobile with the felt ceiling. And the felt had started to droop. So there was just like these like bellowed sections of it was like this, and so it would just like sit on your head, and he like not 1 inch of this car was uncluttered. I mean, it was so much crap and wrappers and boxes, and the driver's side visor, he would put like all his business cards and receipts and all this stuff, but like 2-3 inches thick, and he'd put it with rubber bands onto the driver's side visor, so it would it was like over here on his eyes. And of course he drove 90 miles an hour crisscrossing lanes on the Bell Parkway, right? And so I would be in the passenger seat and he'd be there like this and I'd be here with this thing on my head, and it would just be like this garbage whipping all around, as we went 90 miles an hour on the Bell Parkway. And there was one time we're going along just like that, and then he pulls over onto the shoulder, no warning, and gets out of the car. I'm like, all right, okay. So I follow him, right? I'm like 8, 9 years old. I just get out of the car, and he goes, "Come on, Shrimpy." So I do. He walks a few paces, and he just points up at a fence, and that's it. He just starts to wait. And between the roar of the cars behind me, and him just standing there, it's like I'm kind of scared shitless, but I do it. I just stay there, looking up, looking at the fence, waiting for what feels like forever. When finally I see this little thing come hurling over and land. And for the first time, I look down at the grass on the shoulder. And that thing was a tennis ball. And it is like a minefield of tennis balls all over the shoulder of this particular section of the Bell Parkway. And my grandfather instantly drops down to his knees, puffs out his shirt, and starts scooping up all the tennis balls and putting them into his shirt, like as many of them as he could possibly carry, right? And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do the same thing. I do the same thing with my little, Garfield t-shirt, I pull it open and I start putting all the tennis balls on the shoulder and here we are, we're picking up the tennis balls, right? And we go over to the car and he flings open the trunk, and in there are 100 other used tennis balls. And we dump our tennis balls on top, and then he gets into the car and he slams the door, and I get into the car and I slam the door, right? And he says nothing. And I'm just but I get it. I'm so excited, right? I am he has just let me in on these, this secret, free for all, tennis ball parade. It's just this total big secret we had to get, used sporting goods. I don't know. It's he had figured out, here's the real deal. He had figured out that this fence was just a little bit too short. There was a tennis court on the other side of this park, of the shoulder, and the fence was just a little too short, and so all these tennis balls would be over there, and I guess periodically, who knows for how long, I don't know, a decade, I don't know, how periodically he was pulling over and getting all of these tennis balls. And to this day, I have no idea how he first figured that out, and it's not that he nor I nor anyone we knew played tennis. But should that ever change, we would be ready, you know? We would be ready. So that's my grandfather, ladies and gentlemen. That is my, yeah. Listen, if you were looking for a used tennis ball, he was the guy to go to. All right, so I think we are going to, we're going to go to a little video right now. We're going to go to a little video of my family plot. Okay, go. Hi, guess where we are? My family burial plot. All those people I've been talking about. This is my family plot. My great-grandfather bought this plot. He was a dishwasher, but this was his priority, right? Like, they barely had enough money for any food or clothes, but they were like, you know what we need to do? We need to buy an extremely expensive burial plot. Why? I don't know. Italian Catholicism, that's why. That's their priorities. But my grandfather is here, my grandmother is here, and my great gay uncle Jerry, but you'll notice he's listed here as Julio because that was his actual name, but they Americanized it to Jerry, which is particularly tragic because he was a gay man, and Julio is so much better than Jerry, right? For a gay man in particular. Anyway, hope they're enjoying the show. You enjoying the show? All right, goodbye. All right, welcome back. I hope you liked that little trip to my dead family. Hey-oh. Never thought I'd say that one. All right, everybody feeling ready for a couple more stories? I got 2 more stories for you. All right. So if you remember our question, which was, what do you want your tombstone to say? When I asked our next storyteller that question, she said, why am I here? Please welcome Flash Rosenberg.
I don't think of drawing and photography, writing, or performing as separate disciplines. I do them all. I'm an attention span for hire. And I notice things in order to try to figure out what's going on. So I was pretty excited when I had a chance to invent a class that I could teach at Cooper Union that took place entirely in the subways. The class was called Underground Creativity, Einstein on the D Train. And instead of assignments, which sounded too burdensome, we called what we did noticing games. And imagine you're sitting on the subway seat and you're looking down. And the first game would be look at the shoes, guess the face. Look at the face, guess the shoes. Then we ramp it up a bit for a noticing game called Nuclear Subway. Let's say there's a nuclear accident and the only people left on Earth are in this car with you, and you have to pick someone to mate with to continue the human race. Now, this isn't about biology or gender, just who in this car would you want to get together with to create a new world? He's cute, but she's reading. Well, and if your choice leaves the subway, then you have to pick someone else. Well, sometimes after class, I would stop at Keen's, which is a midtown steakhouse around the corner of my loft, so I could write down what I noticed the students noticing during the class. Now, what am I doing at a steakhouse? Well, I'm their pet vegetarian. I would order the side dishes. I would get the spinach, the mashed potatoes, the salad. And once when I was there on a date, the guy observed, "This is never going to work out. You cannot even commit to an entree. You're never going to commit to a relationship." You're sort of right. I mean, I'm not married. I don't have kids. And I didn't think I had a sense of humor until once I read in the New York Times science section that normal adults laugh about 15 times a day. I figured, whoa, I am way over the limit. So every time I laughed, I made a jotting down of what I laughed about in a notebook for 2 weeks. And turns out I was the one making myself laugh. So I started doing comedy. And one night I was at a club and my great Aunt Leah, who was 89 at the time, she was visiting New York from Virginia, and she came to see me. She had never seen me perform before. And after the show, she comes up to me and says, "Don't let anyone in the family ever make you feel bad because you didn't have kids, because many people believe that children are the essence of life. She said, I wanted kids too, but it didn't happen. You're like me. And the way I see it, those of us who don't have kids have been given some ability to figure out why we are here. So that gift is a challenge. And I was thinking, I've always wondered why I'm here. I mean, since I was age 2 when I was yelling out the 4th floor window from our apartment, why am I here? My mom came in like, what? Well, I saw those people downstairs, down on the sidewalk walking around. Why was I in my crib? Now, so one night after class, I didn't go to Keen's, but I ended up going to the Cornelia Street Cafe because I was going to deliver a humorous toast at a little private cabaret show to celebrate a friend's birthday. And I was dressed up. I like to dress up because I'm a pathological optimist. I mean, I'm ready in case something good is going to happen. And I had my distinctive coat that I love so much that it looks like yarn that's sort of pressed into it as if somebody scribbled with red, black, and gray. And I also think it's nice to dress up because I feel some responsibility in a quiet way to help cheer up New York. Well, the show ended late, and I was really tired, and I was hungry. And so on my way to the West 4th Street subway to catch the Uptown F, I stop and get some bagels, not donuts. I get about a dozen bagels and stick them in my backpack so I can toast one when I get home. And on the way to the subway, I'm thinking, what am I doing? I mean, where's my big project? It just seems like I'm stomping on the ants and not feeding the elephants. I mean, is noticing a career? What's the point? So I get out on the subway steps, go through the turnstile, and I wait for the next train. Next thing I see is bright, blaring lights right above my face with people in masks wearing blue scrubs, looking at me like they're gargoyles, and there's tubes in my arms. Where am I? The nurse says, you're in the emergency room at Bellevue. What subway did I take to get here? She said, you fell on the tracks. You fell on the subway tracks. Well, I always thought, what kind of a clueless person falls on the subway tracks? Apparently, me. Well, the doctor assures that I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. Nothing's broken. There's no trauma. My heart is fine. He said, you probably just fainted from exhaustion. You're good to go. But I ask, what happened? The nurse says, it's the duty of a hospital to save your life, not your stories. And she hands me a plastic bag that says personal belongings. And in it is my beautiful dress that's all cut up. Because if you arrive at a hospital unconscious, they cut your clothes off so they don't disturb you in case you have some broken bones. But by some wild luck, they did not cut my great coat. Well, they hand me this XXX size sweats, wheelchair me to the curb, then leave me to fend for myself. I hail a cab, and as soon as I get home, it's like 11:30 in the morning, I call my brother because I didn't want him to worry since I missed our 7:30 a.m. daily call. Hi, Ken. Sorry I missed our call. I was in the emergency room. I fell on the subway tracks, but I'm okay. And my brother says, that is not a logical sentence in the English language. If you think you are okay, you are not okay. And he jumped up from his desk in his office in Wilmington, Delaware, took the next Amtrak train up to New York to take care of me. And his care was a big comfort. But the whole day I had this sort of shiver, chill, fever feeling because I didn't know what happened. It was a mystery. I mean, I have no images. There was nothing that I noticed. I mean, what happened? Was I pushed? Where did it happen? Who saved me? Scarier than the fall itself was not knowing the story. Well, I figured I'd look online. Surely somebody would have taken a cell phone snap. A woman on the tracks would be more interesting than what you had for dinner. But nothing. No visuals at all, just blank. 2 days later, I get a call from James, the manager at Keen's. How are you? That's strange, I thought. He's never called to find out how I am. I mean, maybe some time goes by between I go to the restaurant, but he's never checked to see how I am. James continues, My waiter, Robert, rescued you the other night. Would you like to know the story? Yeah. And so my brother and I go over, sit with Robert, and Robert explains. He says, I had just gotten off of work at 1 a.m., and I go racing down the steps to catch the Uptown F, and oh, damn, the train is pulling out. I miss it. And so I'm looking down the tracks to see, when the next train might be coming, and I notice in the distance a figure that's sort of unsteady, who seems to be trying to navigate around that really narrow part of the subway platform around the stairs. And suddenly that figure slips and slithers onto the tracks. And then I notice it's your coat. It's you. That's Flash. And so he rallies the few stragglers on the platform to come help. He said the biggest guy jumped down. Somebody was guiding. He was pulling my arms. A woman was on the platform on her cell phone calling 911. The next train is halted. My life is saved. Well, being noticed on the subway tracks is all the celebrity anyone ever needs. Plus, it's like a fashion tip. Be noticeable. If I had been wearing my black puff coat, I would have been disguised as, camouflaged as Dupree. I might still be down there. And always carry bagels in your backpack. Gluten saved my life. They were like little life preservers and probably are the reason why my back isn't broken. Then Robert continues to tell the story. He said, when you were up on the platform, you were all apologetic. You're saying, I'm fine, I'm going to walk home. I'm sorry to cause you so much trouble. Well, those of you who know me will not be surprised to hear that though unconscious, I was still talking. And then he thought, well, he better be sure that I'm okay before he lets me go. So he asked my name, got it. And then he asked for my emergency phone number. And somewhere in the befuddlement, emergency phone number, I thought of the phone number that I was forced to memorize when I was a child during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Endicott 89978. Well, the rescuers were much too young to know that used to be what phone numbers were. So he thought, well, something must be wrong with her, so they called an ambulance. I'm never going to be able to thank Robert enough for saving my life. My brother tried. He took out his wallet and stuck it on the table at Keen's and said, just take whatever you want out of it. Max out the credit cards. There's nothing that matters more to me, nothing more valuable than my sister's life. And the next morning, I was looking out of my fourth-story window, and I was thinking, how does this affect me? How does this change my life? Well, I do know that why I am here is a question I respect more now. And when I was a teenager, I asked my Rabbi Krinsky, why am I here? Meaning, why am I going to Hebrew school for 8 years? And the rabbi said, it's not about learning Hebrew. All the Hebrew you needed to know, you learned the first day. I thought, what, shalom? And I was done? He said, no, not shalom, but hineni, the Hebrew word for here I am. He said, when you are called upon, when you're, during roll call and you answer to your name, you have agreed to be present. You have the ability to notice what there is to do. And then he went on to say, it's not about prayers either. The way to give thanks for being who you are is that you have to be exactly who you are. And then I thought about what Aunt Leah said when, after she saw me do that comedy performance, and she said that I fulfilled what my grandfather could only wish for. She said, her older brother, my Papa Rosie, he rescued the family. He brought them from Europe to America before the Nazis. But she said he didn't want to be a hero. What he wanted to do was perform on stage in New York City. So, hineni, here I am.
Flash Rosenberg, everyone. So good. So good. And I just want to say your name over and over and over again. I also cannot believe I was not named Flash Rosenberg. I hope that everyone's been having a great time. It is time for some thank yous. Tonight's show was produced by Michelle Julowski, Chloe Salmon, and Harry Wheel, and directed by Catherine Burns, Jennifer Hickson, Michelle Julowski, and Sarah Austin Jeunesse. Before I bring our last storyteller up, I am also going to thank all of our other storytellers tonight. Big round of applause for everyone. I'd also really want to thank everybody here at beautiful Greenwood Cemetery, especially Harry Wheel and Daria Mergen. I'd also want a big shout out, a big hug and kiss if I could, but I'm really not allowed to my friend Maz Swift. And to Patrick Rousseau and our excellent live streaming partners at Be Electric who helped make this experience possible tonight. And to all of you watching at home, clap for yourself. So when I asked our final storyteller the question, what do you want written on your tombstone? He said, he shared his whole heart until the voiceless could be heard. Please welcome Devin Sandiford.
Thank you. It was in the craziness of events in June that I made the decision. I'm sitting in my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. There's a global pandemic. I'm at home. I just finished a late night of work after helping my 5 and 8-year-old sons with their remote learning. And now is when I've made the decision to do the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. Call my mom. See, it's kind of weird being a 35-year-old who's afraid to call his mom, but I'm the youngest of 3 in my family, and I kind of just took on the role of the peacemaker in my family. So whenever my brother and sister would start arguing, I would try and find ways to joke and make everybody back to being peaceful and happy. And anytime my brother wasn't being a good listener, I made sure to always listen to my parents and pick up things around the house because I just wanted to bring everybody peace and happiness. But I'm afraid to talk to my mom on this particular night in my apartment because I know the conversation I have to have with her is not going to bring any peace. It's only going to bring pain. Because I have to talk to her about her brother that died when I was little. I don't really know this story because no one's ever told me, but I've pieced together little pieces, and what I know is that when I was 6 years old, my mom's brother was shot and killed on the front lawn of my grandparents' home by the police. And I can't really blame my mom for never telling me this story because I know it's really painful. And I have a lot of painful memories and painful moments from my life that I've never shared with her. So I can't really blame her. And there's especially this one painful moment that I have that I never really shared with her, and it happened when I was 21 years old. When I was 21 years old, I transferred to a new university in Southern California where I'm from, and the university was out along the coast in Long Beach, and I had this roommate situation set up, but my roommate kind of just fell through, and even though I was working 35 hours a week, I didn't have a way to pay for my own place out in Long Beach. So I had to drive all the way from my parents' place, which is an hour and a half away, if there's no traffic, and in Southern California, there is always traffic. So I had to wake up from my parents' house and get out of the house by like 4:30 or 5 o'clock. If I left my parents' house even 1 minute after 5 o'clock, I'd be sitting in like 3 hours of traffic. And this was like my daily commute. I would drive to work, I would sleep in my car for a little bit, I'd work for a few hours, and then I'd go to school where I was double majoring in biomedical and electrical engineering. And then after my late night engineering classes would end, I would usually stop by the gas station, grab myself an energy drink and these Nutter Butter bars, which were just delicious. And that's the only way I could get home. I would just be way too tired, and I was doing this for a long time, and I decided to tell my parents that I was staying with a friend, but I started sleeping in my car next to my work. And just in this random parking lot, it wasn't so bad though. I could, park there in a little secluded area, and the only things I would have to worry about really are the bugs getting in and biting me. I'd have to worry about rolling up the windows so that people wouldn't know that I'm there, and rolling down the windows so it wouldn't get all fogged up. And that's kind of what I did. And my parents didn't know that I was doing this, but they knew that it was starting to get taxing to drive, so they decided that they wanted to get me a hotel. And the first night I stayed at the hotel, it was just wonderful. I had this big room to myself and a bed to myself, and I could watch ESPN until I fell asleep, and ESPN would just watch me. It was just great. But my parents raised me and my siblings to be responsible and independent. And I didn't like to just use my parents' money, so sometimes I preferred to just sleep in my car still and not tell them. And I would do that, especially on nights when I knew that I would have a long day at school. I would do it, but every once in a while, I would treat myself to the hotel. And on one night after my late night engineering classes, I left the school at around 10:30, and I pulled into the hotel parking lot. And to my surprise, I saw a parking spot right by the door of the hotel entrance, and I passed it. And I wanted to back up and get into this spot, and I see a car coming from the back, and I slowly back into the parking spot, and I grab my backpack, and I step out of the car. And as I step out, I see the car rolls up, and it's actually a police car. And the police officer flips on the lights and steps out and asks me for my license and registration. And I'm like, that's a little weird. Like, he came from the other direction. I know this can't be traffic related. And there's been several times where I've been stopped by the cops before for nothing, so I know exactly what he's doing. When he tells me to sit on the curb, I know it's a routine racial profiling stop. He's gonna take my information, he's gonna check it against his database, he's gonna come back when he finds out that I have nothing on it, and he's gonna give me my stuff and let me go. And as I'm sitting on the curb there, waiting, I hear these tires rolling into the parking lot, and I think to myself, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. Like, another guest is gonna come in, and they're gonna see me here, and they're gonna think I'm a criminal, and I look over my shoulder and I see it's not another guest, it's another cop. And this cop car pulls up and it shines its lights directly on me, and two officers step out and stand behind the door. And now I'm like a little worried, like, what's going on? I've never even had a speeding ticket before, I've never had any traffic tickets. I come from a really religious family, so I actually have never had alcohol even though I'm 21 years old. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Before I can process this, I see the lights of another car coming in, and it's another police car, and it pulls up behind me, and it's shining its lights on me, and another officer gets out. And finally, the first officer comes back, and he's asking me all these questions. He wants to know, where am I coming from, and what am I doing here? And then he asks me if he can search my car. And I pause for a second because I know my rights, and I know I can tell him no, but as a black person, I also know that that could make me look more suspicious, that I'm hiding something. I'm not hiding anything, so I tell him, sure, you can search my car. And he begins to search my car, and he looks all the way through with his flashlight. And when he finishes, he asks me if he can search my trunk. And I think to myself, no, like, don't search my trunk. Like, I haven't done anything. And as I'm thinking this, I see another police car pull up, and now there's 4 police cars and 6 officers all surrounding me as I'm sitting on the curb, and I feel like the scum of the earth. And I tell him he can search the trunk, and he searches through the trunk. And he eventually goes back to his police car, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm so frustrated because I had been doing everything I was supposed to be doing in my life. I was double majoring in biomedical and electrical engineering. I was working 35 hours a week to put myself through school. And I was even thinking about my parents' money and easing their minds to not have to do these long drives. And still, I'm sitting here on the curb surrounded by cops like I'm a criminal. And finally, the officer comes back, and he hands me my license and registration, and he says, "You're good to go. Somebody called about a suspicious person, and when I saw you park your car, I thought you might be trying to get away from me." Which makes perfect sense, because usually when people are trying to get away, they take their time to back their cars into a parking spot and step out slowly and wait for you. That's how you get away. And I know it's a complete lie. And what strikes me in that moment is it doesn't matter if it's a lie or not, that this police officer is in a position of power, and he can say anything he wants, and I can only just sit there and take it. And I'm so ashamed that I just sit there and I don't fight back and I don't resist, but I also don't want to end up dead. And as I'm sitting there, I think about my uncle, and I visualize what I've always thought about, even not knowing the story, that just his face is face down on the ground, dead somewhere. And I just say, whatever, I gotta get back into the hotel and just let go of this. And as I'm walking away, the police officer looks at me and says, "You know, you had that Nutter Butter in there. It looked like you had a really great dinner." And this really throws me off because he laughs to himself, and I'm like, this was a joke to him, and this is not a joke to me. And I walk inside the hotel, and all the people who know me from the days before, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened to you. Like, are you okay? Like, can we report this? Like, what should we do? And I tell them, no, I don't want to report it. I just want to get to my room, and I want to get in my bed and hide and pretend like this never happened. And so that's what I do. For my whole life, I pretend like this didn't happen, and I don't tell anyone. I tell my parents just small details. But every time another black man comes into the news with a death, I picture myself on that curb, and I picture my uncle, and I know that I have a lot of pain, and so I want to call my mom and find out what has happened to my uncle. So I finally get the phone in my apartment, and I call her. And as I get a hold of her, we talk, and I tell her about all these dehumanizing moments in my life, and I open up to her, and I tell her all the pain that I have, and I finally ask her to tell me about her brother and what happened. And she tells me about his life, them growing up, and she tells me about the dress that she was wearing. She was wearing this red dress on the day, and my uncle was kind of going a little crazy, and the cops had gotten called, and they had calmed him down, but when he walked outside, the cops were out there with their guns drawn all around him, and my dad was there saying, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. And they shot him anyway and said that he had a weapon on him, but when they searched, they didn't find one. And as my mom tells me this story, she's getting a little emotional. But it's not until she gets to the part where she's talking about my grandma and how my grandma used to always just retell this story anytime a visitor would come over to the house. And every time my grandma told the story, my mom had to relive the moment all over again. And for the first time in my life, I'm seeing tears fill into my mom's eyes. And I can just feel her pain, and I feel so bad that I've brought her this pain. And I thought I was supposed to be the peacemaker, but all I have done here is bring her this pain. But I know that I had to do this because I know there's so much pain inside of me, and I haven't been able to give my heart to the people that I love and to bring peace to anyone from the pieces of my broken heart. And as my mom continues to tell me more things, we talk for 3 hours, I realize that what I'm really looking for was a connection to my mom and to break the silence that I've been holding on to and to break the generational trauma that my family has gone through before it passes on to my sons. And now all I can do is hope for healing as I continue to share my story and to share about the things, the pains from my life. And I think that begins as I speak my uncle's name for the first time. My uncle's name was Roland Edwards, but I called him Uncle Ron. Thank you.
Devin Sanford, everyone. Thank you so much, Devin, for sharing your story with us. It was, really, really brave and great of you to do that. And, I think it's just important to say that this is probably one of my favorite things about the Moth and about Moth storytelling, which is that there was no intermediary in us hearing that story, right? There are far too many, unfortunately, stories like Devin's, but we typically read them, and there's somebody in between, right? There's a journalist, and there's an anchor, and there's somebody else in between us and the person whose life was affected. So I just love being here at the Moth and getting to hear someone tell you their own story. There was no intermediary there, and it was a privilege to me to be able to hear that story without any intermediary. So thank you one more time to Deb. All right, my darlingest dears at home and here, it has been my pleasure. I am Tara Clancy. I have really, really enjoyed being your host tonight. Thank you all for coming. Please go to themoth.org where you can, submit a story on our pitch line, find out when the next slam is going to be, presumably virtual, but go for it. Sign up for our newsletter. And stay tuned, because after the show, we are going to be rolling during the credits. There will be some, photos of us, storytellers, et cetera, et cetera. All right, my dears, good night.